Welcome to Golden Hour Adventures. Today we have an epic adventure that we're going to talk about. We got Jeremy Eppley here, who just ran the last annual Fall State. Jeremy, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good, pretty good. So a little background on how I know Jeremy is I just have a plethora of athletes that I can grab at my free will if I want. No, I can't grab them at free will, but Jeremy and I are both on the Brooks team. So we met last year in California and ran some trails together. We videotaped each other. we're both pretty big on social media and stuff. So I was like, "Hey, will you videotape me?" And then all of a sudden, here I am videotaping him running down the mountain too. So fellow trail runner, fellow ultra runner, and excited to hear the whole story of Fall State.
All right. I guess if you want to just begin by explaining Vol State.
Yeah, that sounds that would be perfect.
Most people don't really know too much about the race besides the name sometimes. Vol State it's an ultra race. It's 314 miles. It starts in Darena, Missouri. You start with a ferry ride from Kentucky to Missouri, merely to go to Missouri, step on the ground, have Laz light his cigarette and start the race, and get back on the ferry.
Let's talk about the cigarette lighter for a second, because if you don't know about that, that's like a crazy thing that Laz does.
Yeah, and that's the way his races begin. His races begin with him lighting up. He watches the clock, counts it down, and lights up his Marlboro.
The funny thing to me, though, is that you ride a ferry to a place, he lights a cigarette, and you get right back on the ferry.
Yes, purely just to say the race started in Missouri. Just so you can have one extra state that you ran through on this ultra.
That is awesome. That's awesome. I love that. Well, what made you decide to do Vol State? Like I've looked you up. You have a pretty deep history of ultra running. What just drove you to like death marching through Tennessee for 10 days in 100-degree heat?
I think the ridiculousness of it, coupled with the fact it was one of Laz's races that is accessible, one that you don't necessarily. It's not the Barclays where you have to write some mysterious essay and do a secret process to get into. It's one of those ones you can go on Ultra sign up for it, and there was a lottery, but even with the wait list, most everybody gets in. So it was just an accessible one, and I knew it was going to be a challenge.
Now, there's two different ways to do it, right? There's the crude versus the screwed. You want to explain what those are?
Well, crude is just like having a crew. It's having a crew on one of those races like Badwater or the Keys, where they can stop anywhere where there's space on the side of the road. They drive the van ahead of you. If you want them to stop every mile and a half and hand you water, carry your gear, change out your gear, they can stop for you. And then there's screwed. Screwed is you are totally reliant on yourself to find food, to find water, to find lodging, and everything else you're going to need along the way. But the great thing is, though, about Screwed is there are the road angels out there, and the road angels play a significant role in this race.
Yes, road angels are amazing. I've watched some footage from the race and just seeing like the people, the different things that people leave out or being there themselves, helping people out. And I think I was definitely following along in your journey through social media and just seeing some of the stuff that you got. And that was super cool.
Oh yeah. No, those people, I mean, there's some people like there's houses that are known along the way. There's like a family called their last name is Nut. So it's the Nut House. And then there's a guy, Bobby Brown. So the people like they will rent like these giant tents, like 2-room tents. And you'll walk in and the first room will be all food and zero gravity chairs. And sometimes they even rent like a porta potty. So you've got somewhere to actually use the bathroom. And then you go in the back and it's all cots with, a pile of sheets and pillows and everything you can imagine. So that stuff, without those guys, I can't imagine how people did this before the Road Angels started becoming as popular or as big as they were on the race.
How many years has this race gone on?
It's been he started it many years ago, but on Ultra Sign Up, I think it's like 20 years worth of races. I could be way off on that, but I want to say it's about 20 years it's been going, and it's been these last 7 or so years where the road angels have gotten really, really big.
Okay. Now you kind of answered the question that I asked, but I feel like I need to dive deeper. Maybe Robbie, you know how to ask this question. I'm not really sure. You're the more analytical type. I asked why you decided to do it, and you said because of accessibility. But I feel like there's something deeper out there. Like you live in Arizona, you got Cocodona, you got all these, you got all these
Yeah,
cool races that are around. Like I want to know why Tennessee.
I, I, I really don't know if I have a good answer for it. I mean, it was a challenge. I mean, I think it's very, on paper, it's generous cutoffs. Because, I mean, you've got 10 days. All you have to do is a 50K per day to get through it.
Just a
In
50K.
theory, that
Yeah,
sounds
just a
great.
50K.
Just a 50K. But and then you think in your head, well, if I just knock out 50 miles a day, it's going to be 6 days. I can knock it out real fast. But the reality, once you hit the streets there, is awful. But back to the question, I still, insanity. I think just trying to find the most ridiculous thing out there. I mean, that's probably part of it.
Now, leading up to this, that 314 miles is no feat that's handled by just average training. What kind of training did you have in your background? And like, how long of preparation did you do for this?
So I was
If you tell
trying.
me you ran like 20 to 30 miles a week, I'm turning this thing off.
No, 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 no. It's, I did not run what I wanted to by any means. I really started my training, I'd say, back in December, specifically for this race. I did like a 6 hour timed event, and then that was December. And I kept my mileage going, I'd say 40 to 70 miles a week for the most part, of just running for the first portion of it. And then I did a 60K at Coldwater Rumble, January. And then my goal was to keep on going and build up to a couple 24 hours. In May, I wanted to go do Nanny Goat, and I wanted to do another one in Arizona. But that life happened, and there were family events that I just could not do those races, and my mileage too was not near what I wanted it to be those weeks. But I still got out there. I still, was putting in those, like I said, 40 to 70. And at the last 2 months, I switched it up to a lot more walking, just based on what people were saying you need to do to prepare for this race. So my mileage went down, but my time on foot, I would say, increased because I'd go out for a 2 hour walk or a 3 hour walk just up and down the hills. And I've got, right outside my house, I can go on a 3 mile loop, 3, 4 mile loop, get 1,000 feet of elevation in. So I
Wow.
can get a lot of elevation, lots of just power walking up those hills right here.
Yeah.
And that I think really saved me in that race at the end of it with the two big climbs.
Yeah, I think a lot of people focus on like I'm going to run this big race and don't realize like how much actual walking they're going to be doing, and they neglect to do the walking practice, and they struggle when it comes down to the time when they no longer can run and they have to resort to walking. So I definitely applaud you for taking 2 months out of that. And sometimes that's got to be hard for like your ego. Like you want to have that 40 to 70 mile weeks of running, and that may drop to 30 miles, but your runs may have been 12 hours where now you're at 20 hours. And so it's like things you got to look at, like time on feet, are extremely important when it comes to running these big events. I personally have never run one, will next year, but I think that you were right on point with what you decided to do for training.
And the other thing I did too with the training, with when I was doing those walks, I made sure, and again, following people's advice, to wear my gear, to wear the full pack that I was going to wear, and to weigh it down, to put in, what I expected, or even more than what I expected to carry during the race, just so I got used to carrying that full bladder around and everything else with me.
I know we typically ask the question at the end, but let's talk about gear a little bit, because with this race being you taking the screwed option of that, you have essentially everything on your back that you need for the entire race. So
Yes.
walk us through a little bit of gear before we jump into the actual race itself.
Okay. So my hydration vest was, I want to say it's Ultra Spire. And it was a 2 liter bag in the back. because I made hydration one of my priorities, just knowing that that could really kick my butt out there. So I had the 2 liter on the back, um, on the front, on the two pouches that they have for the bottles. I would generally just pick up something at the store. So every time I went to the gas station, every time we went into a store, I would get 2 liters to fill that, and I would get a pop. I would get a Coke, a Sun Drop, something with caffeine, and then I would get a Gatorade or a Pedialyte or one of those. So I'd have those up front. So I was getting still my sugars, my caffeine, and the water. Um, on the gear, like things I carried with me were I had a poncho, which did not work out very well. Every time I put it on, the rain would stop. Um, I had an umbrella in there, which was one of the things they recommended. That blew apart immediately. Ended up leaving that in the trash can. Um, a power cell, one of the little solar power cells to charge my phone, because keeping your phone charged, that's another one of the challenges out there that you don't really think about. But your phone, even if you have it on airplane mode, it's draining all day, and you need to check in at 7:30 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. with your location to the race director. So I had that. That thing didn't work out. I tossed that. Um, oh yeah, lots of stuff got ditched along the way. The other messed up thing you had to carry is to mess with you. You know, you usually get your T-shirt at the end of the race, right? They made sure once you were away from your car at the Last Supper, they give you your Vol State 500 T-shirt.
Oh my gosh.
So you're wearing everything all you wore on the bus ride to it was what you're going to carry with you. So if you want to keep that T-shirt, you got to carry that along as well. So that was at the bottom of the hydration pack, soaked with water. It probably weighed 5 pounds, just that shirt alone, with how much sweat and everything that was accumulating over the course of that race. That was miserable.
That's great.
And then side pockets, I was carrying. I had a baggie with all my wires for the phone charging, baggie with all my foot care stuff, baggie with not just Ziploc bags, just so I had extras and little wipies. And then I carried sunscreen, Desitin, and bug spray. So all that was essentially what I was carrying on myself.
Yeah. Did you have like a particular fuel plan, or did you just kind of like whatever I can grab at gas stations type thing?
It was going to be try to eat decent foods. Like my first meal I stopped at a Subway. I ate half a sandwich. I'm like, okay, I'm going to keep the other 6 inches. I'm going to take this with me. By the time I got to the next point where I was sitting down at like an aid station, oh no, I don't even want to eat this. Does anyone else want the sandwich? This looks awful. And food started. It really, most food did not look appetizing. You know how it gets once you get
Yeah.
deeper into a race. A lot of it's very weird stuff that you end up eating. And you don't have the aid station, so I didn't have like the random little bits of pickles or boiled potatoes. My go-tos. Um, it was a lot more fast food, gas station pizza, that type of stuff. Some of the Angel stations had burgers or bratwurst that they were cooking for us, so that was cool. And then a lot of them always had like oatmeal cream pies and little Debbie's and stuff like that. So I mean,
Nice.
there was no real like I need to have this many calories. I'm eating when I'm hungry. When I'm in
Yeah.
a town and I have food and it's available, I'm grabbing it and trying to eat it.
Well,
If
I
it's
think
on.
like with a race where you're moving, a lot slower than you would, let's say, for a 100 miler. Like you potentially are only doing 30 miles a day, maybe up to 50. Like you have
Yeah.
that option to be able to eat, when you're hungry versus like, all right, let's get this every hour to maintain type thing.
Oh yeah, yeah. And one of the best meals I did have was this. We had a sit down at the top of one of the climbs in Monteagle, Tennessee, and it was a Southern diner where they had a buffet with chicken livers and all sorts of stuff. But I went with the biscuits and gravy and some hash browns. So that was just delicious. That was an amazing meal to have in the middle of a race. It
That's
really
awesome.
something that weighed me down, but it was well worth putting that in my belly.
Yeah, that's great. All right, man. Well, let's jump into the race. Let's start. He lights the cigarette and you get back on. Like, walk us through it.
Okay, so we get that. We take the ferry back across and we go into Kentucky. You go through a small little town called Hickman, Kentucky. He went out of his way to find a set of stairs that's through like this jungle of trees that's about 70 stairs tall, climbing up into the city. Every city that you go through, he makes sure to route you by like the city hall or like the big municipal building in the city. So you kind of weave your way through the cities, go by that. And once you're out of Hickman, which is a small town, you're out in farm fields. You're out in farm fields for probably 10 miles before you get into Tennessee. So you've already knocked out Missouri, you knocked out Kentucky, and you're into Tennessee within about 10 miles.
Wow.
And then you just, the first day it was a big pack of us. So we were all still kind of together. You're mixing, you're kind of matching paces with people. Just kind of some people taking off running. Those guys that finished the race in 4 days or whatever they finished it in. Those guys just kind of sprint off, and the rest of us trail behind. Just this long group of people that eventually separates ourselves out over the course of time. The cities kind of became a blur after a while. Like, I'd go through them and I'd kind of remember in order. Okay, we went through Hickman, we went through Union City, or we went through, and then it just after a while I couldn't even keep track of what cities I'd gone through anymore because they're all kind of looking the same. They're all that town hall downtown with the block of houses, block of buildings around it, and back off into the cornfields and off into the wilderness again every time.
How far between towns was it?
At the beginning, it was nice. It felt a while at first, but we didn't realize how nice it was at the beginning. Because at the beginning, it was maybe 8, 10, no more than maybe 12 miles between towns. And then you get to a point later in the race where, like, my most miserable portion of the race was between Lewisburg and Shelbyville. And it's a 20-mile gap. It's a 20-mile gap, and you're figuring everything you're calculating, because you're always just calculating in your head pretty much a 3-mile-an-hour pace, because that's your walking pace once you've slowed down from that power walk you had that first day. And that 20 miles, when I headed out and it was the sun cooking down on me, it was already heating up. It was going to be one of the hotter days of the race. The humidity clicking. It was just insurmountable in my head to be able to do 7 hours with what I had on my back. Just fear that I wasn't going to have enough with me.
Yeah.
And that was rough. But even in that 20-mile gap, there was a Dollar General. There was other places that did pop up.
Okay. So you at least had somewhat of aid in between that you could.
Oh yeah, no, there was. I didn't know. There was one spot where I was already desperate. It was only maybe like 4 miles in, and I see the sign that says sandwiches, and it looks like a convenience store. So we walk up to it all. I was with another guy, and we're all excited. Okay, we're gonna get something to drink. We're gonna get some food, and it was now an upholstery shop. just to mess with me. So I go in, and I still talk to the woman in there. She lets me use the bathroom, and I tell her at that point, I'm like, "You've got a bench outside. I'm gonna live on your bench for a while. That's where I'm gonna take up residence during the heat of the day." And she just mentioned to me, though, that, hey, the Dollar General's another, less than a mile down the road. So, that got me to move on, and I got to the Dollar General and was able to get some calories there and still be miserable, but it helped me push on a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of points during that section where I just wanted to break down and not, call the meat wagon. I wanted to call up the meat wagon and say, I'm done. You can come pick me up. This is where I'm going to be living on this bench.
Did you have any issues with animals along the course?
Dogs are the biggest issue along the course, and there were people. Supposedly, somebody did get bit, or at least got snapped at. We had a couple where, again, I was with someone at the time, and he was able to pull out. He was using walking sticks, the trekking poles, and he kind of swing those, and I was just kind of trying to use a commanding voice, and the dogs would keep on coming at you, but they would never really attack. They were just kind of guarding their property, and once you passed that property, they kind of backed off.
Oh, okay.
So I personally didn't have any major issues with animals.
Yeah, I've heard and read in the past that that's a common thing that people deal with is dogs, basically.
Oh yeah, and there was a point too when we passed a dirt road, and one dog came out and started looking both ways, and we looked back, and there was like 6 other dogs with him, And I don't think they really paid us much attention. But it's like if that one decided to come at us, that one would have been a little bit nasty, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do people that are along the route know that this race is going on, or are they kind of just oblivious to what's happening?
A majority do. A lot of these towns have signs. Welcome walkers or welcome line ups.
There's no welcome walkers. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah. And there's even a spot where they had like one of the construction signs that say, caution, walkers ahead.
Yeah.
So the people do know, but you do have a lot of people that aren't, maybe moved into the area or just, have been at work on the days of the race before previously when it came through their town. And they'll pull up next to you and be like, what are you people doing? What is going on? Like, what are you, where did you start? Where are you going? And they're just always their mind is blown when they talk to you about what's going on. So it kind of, if you're in a down spot and they're all amazed, it kind of helps you out sometimes.
Yeah, I bet. That's great. Um, Robbie, I know you got a couple questions.
Well, you asked the. I had a friend run it. He ran it a few years ago. He was talking about the dogs. He got chased by dogs quite a bit. But one thing he mentioned was the food thing. He ran it screwed himself, but he would camp out because a lot of the fast food restaurants, they would close kind of early.
Yes. Oh yeah. Very much.
And his thing was he would sleep on their bench in front of the fast food or whatever restaurant he could find, right? And he was telling me this story. There was a Mexican restaurant, and it was like the only one around. And he spent the night there, waited for them to open so he could go in there. He went in there and ate whatever. Then he got a craving that all he could eat was Mexican food after that one place. So then, like every town he's going into, he's trying to find a Mexican place to eat at. And I guess they're hit or miss. But it was just kind of funny listening to him tell me about how he just got into Mexican food for some reason on his journey across Tennessee. I lost my train of thought. Oh, one thing's like, so you kind of do some back roads too, don't you? It's like not all paved roads, so you're actually like going through random back roads through Tennessee.
It's not dirt roads ever. I don't think it was, but it was definitely small country roads with no shoulder.
And he was telling me, sometimes you're in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee, and it got a little spooky. Did you ever have any of those little? I don't know if you were traveling at night or if you were resting, but sometimes he was traveling at night. It was a little.
I tried doing a majority of my travel at night, just because it was so hot during the day. I'm in Arizona, and we have the same temperatures as they have there. But it was that humidity added to it just made it so miserable during the day that I tried. There was a couple times where I even got a hotel room during the day and slept for like 3-4 hours at that hotel room so I could just get rest to go back out there at night and power through and get my mileage taken out at night. There were some definite spooky spots where it was just kind of like, who walks this? You can't imagine anybody else besides these runners have ever walked these roads at night through these just backwoods portions of Tennessee. I mean, everyone we came across was great people, but if car comes by and you're always kind of like, if someone wants to mess with me, they really could here because I'm pretty tired. So, no banjos playing or anything like that.
His reference was Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
I could see that. I could definitely, especially some of the, these broken down buildings that are out there and some of these older farms. Yeah, for sure.
So you were doing the majority of your traveling at night.
Yes.
Where else did you find yourself during the day if you didn't have a hotel?
If I didn't have a hotel, it would be hoping to find an angel station that had some chairs and I could just kind of relax in the shade. A lot of them have some big fans out there, so you can, at least get that breeze going on you. Or I didn't want to, but I'd end up trucking through. My plan it started in days. It moved to sleep during the day for 2 days, and then it kind of just became mish and mash of whenever I could find sleep, I was going to take sleep, and whenever I could move, I was going to move. So it's you make that plan, but you can never stick to it just because you want to, but then you're calculating out, hey, I've got another 15 miles to cover to this next town. I can't go to sleep right now. I need to start moving again. And I'm still, for this last week, I've been waking up. Like, I'll wake up after like 3 hours and start doing math in my head again. Like, I need to start moving. What do I need to do? Like, my brain has still not gotten out of that rhythm of just calculating mileage and trying to figure out what my next move needs to be.
How many miles did you get the first day?
The first day was the biggest. I want to say it was only, again, I thought it was going to be better. I want to say it was 52 miles on the first 24-hour period.
That's really good, yeah.
That's a good day.
Yeah, oh yeah, and no other day compared to that afterwards. There were some 12-hour periods after that where I only moved like 12 miles.
Awesome.
It sucked. You hit these spots where, I ended up running a lot of it with this one guy, Alan. And we were kind of just going the same pace, right? And so it was good to have someone with me. We could kind of always, BS with each other and talk. We'd get in our moods where, we're just trucking through and we're tired. But it gave me someone to talk to. But we'd hit these points, especially at night, where we'd start hitting what we were calling like negative miles. We'd be walking, and I'd be like, okay, I'm checking my watch right now. We know it's 20 minutes till the next mile is knocked out. It's 3:20 right now. I'm going to do my best not to look at my watch again. I'm going to truck through, and by the time I look at my watch again, it's going to be like a mile, 2 miles down the road. We're going to be doing good. And I use all my resistance. Look at that watch, and it's 3:21. Seriously, like in my head, it's like we've already gone a mile. It's at least a mile. I'm checking the watch. 1 minute. We were moving through time warps just backwards at points. It was so, and especially when you knew like there was an aid station coming up or somewhere where you might have a chance to sleep, those miles just became so long. It was awful.
I always heard stories about people just looking like bums, just sitting on the benches in like random towns and, in front of McDonald's or something like that. And you're just like, no, we're actually running a race.
There were definitely times, no one ever said anything, but I got the looks, and it was in front of a McDonald's at a gas station. The one point during the race where I actually ran, because I saw him, I was looking up, the next town, and it was Parker's Crossing or something like that, and I could see a McDonald's closed at 11 o'clock. So I'm like, I'm not going to make it if I just walk. I need to run. So I actually ran to get myself into there, and then the McDonald's itself outside was closed. So I have to walk through the drive-thru, and the guy tells me, you can't order here. You have to go to the window. So he at least let me order, but I had to go to the window and order through there, and they served me through the window, which was great. But that was the one point. That was my fastest mile probably during that entire race.
That's
was
awesome.
Just to get to a McDonald's before the drive-through window closed there.
And
then sit out in front looking homeless eating.
You're never going to hear an ultra race that I had to get to McDonald's before it closed.
Best part about this.
Random thought here, but did you keep track of how much money you spent on just like McDonald's or Dollar General? That would be that'd be interesting though.
Oh yeah, and I've seen people do breakdowns of it. In the random stuff I bought, the food. I mean, it was definitely $10 to $12 minimum every time in a gas station.
Yeah.
The hotels are what really added up because some of them were cheaper hotels, but those always seem to be even the cheap ones, $100 every pop. And it was just I think 2 that I used.
I can imagine Jeremy walking into a hotel and be like, "Hey, I just need this for like 3 hours," and they're like, "What?"
Oh, there was a couple towns where I believe they were already hourly rates to begin with, so it wasn't really a question.
That's great.
Oh, yeah.
I bet it was nice to like get a shower and like sleep in an actual bed for a couple hours. And
it was. The showers were amazing, but like the first time I stayed in a hotel, I didn't shower because I had already gotten some blisters on my feet. And I was very afraid of just how much that was going to burn.
Yeah.
Because I've had some blisters. It's 20 miles into the race. At the first, like one of the first places, there's a sporting goods store that you stop at, and they've got some stuff out in front. I took off my shoes because I was going to, reapply some squirrel's nut butter, which all melted, by the way, and just fell right out of the tin. I had the wrong. I guess I had the winter version instead of the summer or whatever, and it turned to liquid and just poured right out. So that was all gone.
Oh gosh.
So I desiccanted my feet, but when I pulled off the socks to look at them, my heel. I didn't take a picture because I didn't want to. Normally, I do document all my blisters and stuff, but I just did not want my wife. I didn't want anyone to know how bad it was already. It looked like if you watched Sally McRae's video about Cocodona a couple years ago,
yeah,
it looked like that heel already 20 miles into the race.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
you shared a picture of it recently, didn't you, on your socials?
And that was after a couple days. So at that point, the only thing I had with me was I had some KT tape, and I ended up. This worked out. I cleaned it up, and I used the KT tape to pin the skin back into place, and just kind of take that flap and pull it up and hold it there. And through the process of rechanging that every time I stopped and letting it dry out, it actually healed itself fairly well. But I thought that blister was gonna kill my race. I'm like 20 miles in and I'm done. Like, I'm going to hobble this out, but this is done. Like, there's no way I'm finishing another almost 300 miles. But it worked out. It worked out. But it was because of that blister. I was so afraid of the water just going in there and just causing so much pain. And I was afraid of infection too. That's always something I'm always fearful of with those blisters on the feet, knowing I'm going to be out there with those shoes on.
How did the feet hold up with that much time being on them?
Miserable. My feet were so miserable. There's just blisters on top of blisters. Blisters that healed during the race and formed other blisters on top of them. Towards the end of the race, so it took me 8 days, right? 8 days and some 5 hours or whatever it was, almost 6 hours to finish the race. The last couple times I slept at night, it was cots, and it was a cot in a driveway and a cot in one of those angel stations. I would take off my feet to let them dry, and I couldn't sleep because the bottoms of my feet were in so much pain that even with I would take some Tylenol throughout the race when I was starting to feel it, but it was just so much pain on the bottom that I could not sleep. I was just kind of sitting there wincing, trying to overpower that to get to sleep.
Yeah. What about chafe issues otherwise? Any other chafe issues or
miserable chafe issues? My armpits, there's just one little seam on t-shirts right in your armpit, right? Never causes an issue on any other run in my life. I had to cut the armpits out of my shirt because the chafing on my armpits was becoming unbearable and the sweat would pour into there every time. So the sweat and everything just caused that burning there. And then in the groin region, I had heat rash and chafing going on. Oh. So the heat rash just was awful. It covered me from pretty much my belly down around all the way to my butt. Just covered everything. And so every time I would stop, I'd lather myself up. The only relief I could find was just coating everything in Desitin. And that seemed to do the trick, but you start walking and stuff comes off, and you're just I went through a whole industrial sized tube of Desitin through this race.
I was gonna ask if you had to buy more.
Oh yeah, no, I did have to resupply on Desitin because I started off with a small tube. Start with the big tube. Don't even just start with the big tube if you're going to do this one. And the liner of my pants on the shorts I was wearing became so irritating too that I ended up cutting that out, and it was just kind of flopped around like this ragged skirt hanging out of my pants. So I didn't feel like sitting there taking my time to trim it. So my liner's hanging out the outside too as well. Just to add to the homeless look also.
I can't even imagine.
Oh, the photographer at the end, she's like, I've never seen it. She's like, started taking pictures. She's like, I've never seen anything like this. This is really stupid.
Why didn't you just take the liner out and cut it out? Like,
because I didn't want to spend any more time dealing with it. Once I cut it, it was done. It was out of my way. It wasn't chafing my legs anymore. I was content. No work else. No other work was needed.
That is so funny.
Long liner or like the brief liner?
It was like a brief liner too, which normally for me, or not, I'm sorry, not it wasn't the brief liner. It was one of the ones that's more like
the shorts,
boxers. Like a short, yeah, like compression shorts.
Yeah,
and those worked great for me. It was miserable. And then after that, to try dealing with that, I bought Dollar General boxer shorts.
Oh no!
Oh yeah. So I ended up rotating through. And they would work for a little bit, and then the sweat would get in those, and it would just make the one point where I just got so fed up I had to run into a field and pull them off was during a rainstorm. The rain came down, and then it moved all the sweat into all the heat rash going on down there, and it got stagnated in those boxer shorts that just held them there. And I had to go into a farmer's field and just pull them off. I was done. These boxers. Carry them so I could throw them in the trash, not leave them there. But miserable. It was so much dealing with silliness like that throughout this race that really is what makes me happy when I finally get through it.
That's hilarious. Well, on the lines of pulling underwear and stripping down, what is one of the more embarrassing things that happened to you while you were out there?
I really had to take a shit at one point, and
I would imagine after 8 days.
Yeah, after a while, I kind of trained myself to being able to shit on command at like gas stations. I see a gas station. Okay, this is when I go. I'm good to go now. But early on in the race, I was leaving. It was after I ate that McDonald's. It was after Parker's Crossing, and I just had to go so bad. And those woods in Tennessee are not like. It's not like woods where you can just kind of go into and there's space. Like it's like briars. Like it's like you can't just pop in there and pop out. So I ended up having to use a guardrail on the side of the road.
Oh my gosh! Were you hanging over the guardrail or just?
Oh yeah, no, it was just perfect height. Perfect height. It was an excellent spot. Don't get me wrong. But the real embarrassment was when I was done. Less than a mile down the road was an Angel Station with a porta john. And I was just, oh my God. Like, if I just knew, you guys would have given me the comfort. This would have been a great time. But no.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was rough.
With how unique this race is, especially when you're in the screwed part. Like I'm thinking as you're talking, like, well, I got grocery stores, sporting goods stores. I got stuff that I can buy that I wouldn't have during a normal ultra race.
Of course.
But then you mentioned some other stuff that you couldn't, that was out of your control. Stuff that was just like the chafing and having to tear the liner out of that. What did you learn from being able to be self-supported with like creature comforts than compared to shit that you couldn't control?
It's I'm trying to follow here. The stuff I couldn't control is the stuff that really, the creature comforts I can do without, right? I learned, early on, in life in general, I don't always need those creature comforts.
Mm-hmm.
But those certain things like the chafing, and I told someone at one point too, I'm like, if there's anything that's going to knock me out right now, it's this chafing. It's this I can't get rid of the burning sensation. If I could, I can truck through pretty much anything, and I can get by without a lot. I can get by without food for, many miles right now. But I can't get rid, if I can't get rid of this burning, I need to just end this race so I can find a way to be comfortable.
Well, I guess a better way to word that would be like, so you could buy whatever you needed if it was accessible, but there was things that you couldn't control. Were you using that to play that like, oh, I'm chafing really bad right now, but once I get to the next gas station, I can get a cold drink and maybe some ice and clean up and use the restroom,
Oh
that
yeah,
type of thing.
that
Is that
incentive.
kind of what helped? Because I'm trying to think, like,
I
you're
got
running
you.
100 mile race in the mountains. Like, there's no, whatever the aid station gives you or you brought with you is all you got. But you were able to buy whatever you kind of needed on the way if it was accessible. But then you would have those things that you couldn't control. So in my mind, it's being like leveraging those things that I can make myself feel better, even though
Oh yeah,
I'm suffering horribly right now.
yeah. Oh yeah. And the biggest motivating factor for me by the end of it was, those last few days when I knew there was a spot I could shower at. That was a great motivation because that shower just, it, you get cleaned off, so you start to feel like a human again. You don't feel like a stray dog out there on the road. You don't feel homeless. And it's those things. It's that was probably the biggest one. And sleeping somewhere that wasn't, if I knew again, there was a cot or an air mattress, as opposed to sleeping in a driveway. Those were great motivating factors to keep me moving along. If I'd be tired and I'd be in those negative miles, but I knew those things were ahead of me and I'd trudge through to get to those. And that's definitely something to help me move on.
It's just like, we train for ultras one way, but everything when you do Vol State and you're screwed gets flipped on its head.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. No, and there's this woman, Terry Wurzbacher, I believe her name, and she's this older woman who's done Fall State many times, and she's usually the back of the pack. And she always loves to throw out the Mike Tyson quote of, everybody's got a game plan until you get punched in the face. And that's really what it is. You go into it thinking you're going to run those 50-mile days. You go into it thinking you can go without a shower for 3 days. These things that you think you can kind of power through, and you can't. Life turns. You get that blister 20 miles in. You get something throwing you upside down. So it's crazy. It's crazy to see what you end up being able to do to get through it.
It's more than the 90% physical, 10% mental. That's a very, very, very mental driven style race.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, Jeremy, talk us a little bit about like what was some of the gear that you wore, not necessarily your pack and stuff, but like, what was your shoe rotation if you had one, or what was your, what were you doing?
There's no rotation because
I guess because you had to carry them.
I had to carry them, but I did make a okay. So I was wearing the Brooks Ghost Max, which I've run a couple races with the Ghost Max, and they worked fine for me. But this one again, everyone says buy a size large and buy wide.
Mm-hmm.
So that flippage of starting off at the beginning of the race is definitely what I blame for my blister, because you add that humidity, and then I've run wide shoes before, a lot of trail ones I buy wide, but eventually I did need it as well because I got to the point where my foot did not feel like it even could fit in my shoe. But it was the Ghost Max, and they wore through the 314 miles of asphalt wore through the sole of it. There
Oh
were
my
some
gosh.
spots where it's amazing the beating that those shoes took, and those spots where it wore through the sole was exactly where my feet took the beatings too. It's right where my blisters are on the bottom. It got to the point towards the end of the race where it felt like my little toe didn't fit inside my shoe anymore. And you see a lot of people on Vol State. You'll see their pictures of they end up cutting the toes out of their shoes. They make little sandals out of them, or they just cut the big toe holes for their feet to be able to expand. I didn't want to do that because we still had potential of rain, and I didn't want all that water and all that dirt from the street getting in on my blisters. So I kept them. But at a Dollar General, I did buy myself, maybe with 2-3 days to go, a pair of slippers. And I tried, it was some Tennessee Volunteer slippers, nice and padded, They didn't hold on I tried walking in them a little bit. That didn't work very well. But they paid off at the aid stations. So I'd carry them in my backpack, and when you'd lay down at the angel stations, lay down at night. It's nice to have those slippers there instead of you get up and you have that urge to go to the bathroom or get up and get some food. It was great to have those slippers there. So that was one of those like extra bonuses that you probably shouldn't carry that extra weight, but it ended up like being a nice comfort to have towards the end of the race.
For sure. Well, Jeremy, last question. Would you do it again?
I don't know if I would do this one again. I have been talking with the wife, who's not very happy about the idea. I would like to do Heart of the South.
Oh, okay. Which
is
hotter and harder and
his other one. Yeah, it's the one where you don't know the route until the day of the race.
Yeah. Perfect.
And so you don't get those angel stations because it's not an established course. So that's one of those big things. It's more that's kind of like the graduate level Vol State experience, people say.
Got you.
You have your introductory and then graduate.
Nice.
So,
well, Jeremy, where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram at Jeremy Runs the Desert. Jeremy _runs _the _desert. But I'm sure it's easier to type it in, just Jeremy. I'm sure it shows up if you write Jeremy Runs the Desert, something like that. And that's where I'm most active. That's where I've got all these pictures of, everything from this race, from the blisters to the shoe wear to what I carried. It's all on there. So if anyone wants to see that, that's where they can see it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, man, and congrats on an epic finish.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. It was super fun. Glad to be able to share it with you guys.
Absolutely.